Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time we're talking episode 1 of season 4 of Arrow called Green Arrow. And wow, what a journey it's been to this moment. When this show first started, just the endless complaints about how this isn't Green Arrow. Why is he called the Arrow? Why is he called Green Arrow? Why doesn't he have the stupid why doesn't he have the stupid goatee we all laugh at? Why doesn't he have the stupid Robin Hood hat? Well, here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Oliver is finally calling himself Green Arrow. And the show's creators have always said that becoming Green Arrow, that moment, was always meant to be a huge journey. And frankly, I'm glad for their choice. Oliver being the Green Arrow right out of the box, no. That just doesn't make sense. Now, granted, the sort of very dark, brooding guy who kills people sort of thing, obviously taken a lot of pages out of the Christopher Nolan book. Not exactly traditional Green Arrow. But, superheroes change to reflect the times. And anybody who's genuinely familiar with the Green Arrow comics, come on, these were written and drawn by guys like John Ostrander and Mike Grell. Guys who have never, ever shied away from the darker side of things. I mean, I've read some of the old Green Arrow comics from the 80s that those guys did together. Yeah, they're pretty rough. I mean, there's some very tough stuff in those. Stuff that resonates strongly even today. So, the idea that Green Arrow was sort of like, some joking dude like Spider-Man with a bow and arrow. Okay, while the more humorous interpretation of the character has existed and is perfectly valid, a darker Green Arrow as a darker character is also a perfectly valid interpretation. Which I suppose makes it kind of funny that this is the moment where Oliver becoming Green Arrow is actually a significant transition to him as a lighter character. And this is an enormous contrast to what we see with Oliver in the flashbacks. That's where he's really taking his first steps, his first tries as the Hood. Is kind of, if you'll remember, what he was initially called when he was just killing people left and right in his early days back in Starling City. Here in Coast City, he's not faring so well. He gets taken down by some punk-ass drug dealer. Then is promptly suckered by Amanda Waller, who takes a moment to remind him of torturing General Shreve to death. Oliver is clearly unhappy with having approval from somebody like Waller, and then, of course, he's promptly shanghaied and kicked back to Lian Yu. So it's an enormous circle. And of course, that flashback, you can't really mention that without talking about the Green Lantern shoutouts. You pay attention, you can see a little bit of a nod to the Green Lantern oath on a billboard. And most exciting of all, we briefly get to see somebody with a jacket, wearing a jacket with the surname Jordan stenciled on it, written on it. And of course, this is doubtlessly a reference to Hal Jordan, aka Green Lantern. And Coast City is his normal beat. Of course, for legal reasons, they can't actually have Green Arrow on the show. Sorry, I got an email on my phone. iPad, I guess I should say. Sorry. So that was very cool. Especially for me, as I did actually video reviews for the Green Lantern animated series, which was really quite a good show. But anyway, let's kind of move on into the present day, and let's just keep continuing to talk about Oliver. And of course, he and Felicity are sharing domestic bliss in Ivytown, which is kind of nice. Ivytown is the traditional home of the Atom, sort of, as I understand, always meant to be sort of analogous to Boston, although just kind of the way Laurel and Thea are able to pop over there. I guess it too has sort of been moved to the West Coast, because Arrow's always sort of heavily been implied to be on the West Coast. I kind of like imagine Starling City as sort of being Northern California, and then Central and Keystone cities probably being up around Washington State or something like that. But that's just my personal speculation on the situation. So yeah, it was pretty fun just sort of watching Oliver and Felicity try and be normal people, and especially their exasperation, Oliver's exasperation with his annoying neighbors. It just really goes to show that, and the whole that Felicity was helping the team behind his back. That these are people who are just not geared for suburbia normal life anymore. They can't gear down into that properly. They try. I mean, Oliver was even going to flat out ask Felicity to marry him until fate intervened, much to Oliver's annoyance. But yeah, so this leads everybody to being drawn back to Starling City. And I like how Oliver, when he goes in there, he immediately starts trying to bark orders at the team, and then realizes like, oh wait, yeah, I left Diggle in charge. Sorry, my bad. And then everybody listens to him anyway. But yeah, I do think that this is probably one of the better examples I've seen of the whole getting the band back together, as it were. And yeah, I did like when Oliver basically got his ass whooped by Damien Dark. After what happened with Ra's al Ghul last time around, something that was going to have to be a pretty hard one to top. But it's like, okay, Oliver's got nothing against magic, which makes this pretty forgivable. Now, he does mention that he's seen people with mystical abilities before. Now, you could take that a couple of different ways. That something perhaps in the flashback is going to involve mysticism. And then there's also the Vixen webisodes, and it is confirmed there that Vixen does indeed get her powers from magic, and the timeline on that is that it did indeed happen before the events of this episode. So actually, Barry would be aware of people with mystical abilities as well. And come to think of it, Felicity and Cisco were guest stars in that. So I suppose, well, yeah, I guess we'll figure it out. But yeah, the Vixen thing, we'll just sort of leave that off to the side for now. And Oliver's coming back obviously has a big influence on everybody around him. Dig is still really not wanting to forgive Oliver for what happened. Interestingly, though, Lila already has. Now, part of that you can chalk up to Lila and Oliver not really being as tight. I mean, Oliver and Dig are kind of like brothers in a lot of ways. But it is kind of cool that she understands the situation. I suppose just maybe the moral grayness of the world of covert ops is a little bit fresher in her mind. The sort of compromises that people have to make in those sort of situations. It's a little, as I said, well, fresher in her mind than it is for Diggle. And, well, as much as Dig kind of lambasted Oliver for not letting the team in on what was going on last season, this season he chooses not to let the team in on the whole Hive situation, which is doubtlessly going to come round and bite everybody in the butt sooner or later. So yeah, Dig's being a little bit of a hypocrite here. Anyway, though, despite the tension between these two, they do end up working together, and Dig friggin' tranks Damien Dark and saves Oliver's life. And you can see Diggle sort of really struggling with himself. He's like, I want to forgive Oliver, but I don't want to forgive him at the same time. But like it or not, a significant step has been made in the direction of Diggle and Oliver rebuilding their trust, the bond of trust between them. And well, that can really only be a good thing. And yeah, Diggle's helmet, well, when I saw the promo art for it, the promo pictures, I was like, but when you actually see him out on the street when it's dark and stuff, it actually does work a lot better. So, it's not a perfect solution, but he really did need some kind of a mask or something. Let's see. Nothing really huge to say about Laurel this episode. Her continued sort of weird situation with her dad. Yeah, when she finds out what's going on with Quentin and Damien Dark, that's gonna be extraordinarily unpleasant. Um, Now Thea. Now here, Thea's keeps it pretty low key for the most part this episode. She just had that moment where she actually freaks out and is basically beating a guy to death, and Oliver has to sort of rein her back in. And this is doubtlessly after effects of the Lazarus Pit. That was never really dealt with very much, and I think that it's just continued to linger and perhaps fester, and now it's really kind of starting to come to the fore. It's also pretty funny to listen to her like, "Hey, hey, I said call me Red Arrow," and then everybody just completely ignores her and goes on calling her Speedy, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Let's see, what else? What else? What else? Oh yeah, we almost forgot to talk about Felicity. Well, nothing really huge to say about her. We talked about her and Oliver's domestic situation. Oliver obviously kind of unhappy when he found out that Felicity had been helping the team behind his back, but I think that was really just more the fact that Felicity had been lying to him. And it's never fun when you find out that somebody you care about has been lying to you. It's impossible to not be upset. But to their credit, they both get Oliver gets over it pretty quick. He doubtlessly understands really well why Felicity did what she did, and he's just really frustrated in the situation, I think. So, oh yeah, and of course Felicity is still a little off balance due to the situation of having been made CEO of Palmer Tech, and is dealing with that whole fight with the board due to Ray believing to have died in the explosion. Now, of course, we know that he's really just shrunk down and that he'll be popping up on Legends of Tomorrow. And it was kind of nice that they used that as a reason for why they renamed Starling City to Star City, because that was Ray's idea. Not oddly unlike the way Malcolm Merlin was the first person in the show to float the term Green Arrow, if you remember that back from season 1. I really actually would love a scene where he says like, "Oh, it took you a while, but you took my suggestion," and all, just like, go suck an egg, Malcolm. uh, but I really wouldn't surprise me if we didn't have that moment there at some point during the season. Let's see. Who all else do we have to talk about? Yeah, Quentin Lance. Now, Quentin's an interesting person in this situation. Um, Hilariously, no, like I love how they mention like all the people who've been mayor before have been violently killed, as has the previous district attorney, and God only knows how many city officials. So Starling City is being run by a committee, and then everybody who's on the committee except Quentin gets murdered. And then we find out it's because he's already in cahoots with Damien Dark. Now, I don't really believe Quentin believes that Starling City deserves to die. The idea of Star City, Starling City, whatever, as a place that deserves to die, to be wiped off the map. No way, that's Malcolm Merlin thinking, and I don't think Quentin would ever go there. But he's still really focused on the idea that Oliver has somehow brought all of this madness to the city with him. And just sort of the things we see seems to indicate that the city might even be worse off than it was in season 1. And here Quentin is just laser focused on putting all the blame on Oliver, which is really bizarre when you stop and think about it, because remember, he knows for a fact that if it wasn't for the vigilante, the Glades would have been destroyed by Malcolm Merlin. More than 500 people died, but it would have been a heck of a lot more than that if it hadn't been for Oliver. But just the constant insanity that has been hitting the city again and again has just completely blinded Quentin to the good that Oliver has done. So yeah, I think he's really under Damien Dark's thumb probably because he's just Damien Dark was like, "Hey, do what I say or I'll kill your daughter." So we'll see. So I suppose that brings us to Damien Dark, played by an actor whose name I can't remember because I can never remember actors' names like 90% of the time. Now this is a fella whose work I am familiar with. I first saw him in a short-lived TV show years ago called Boomtown. He played a lawyer there, and he delivered a really good performance. So I've seen him in other stuff here and there. Oddly enough, I was in Walmart the other week walking past one of those TVs that is like showing the movies in kind of 3D, but the movie obviously wasn't intended to be filmed that way, so it looks a little bit off and strange. And apparently he was in Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. Yeah, I've never watched the Paul Blart movies because not my thing. Anywho, so Damien Dark, a character I vaguely remember from the comics. Don't really know him very well. He's not really a well-defined character. Here, I don't even think he had his powers from mysticism in the comics, but don't quote me on that. But what's interesting here is that they have him as a magical character here, and we see him praying to this idol, and I can't help but wonder if it's intended to be Trigon the Terrible, who's one of the major demons in the DC universe, as well as being the father of Teen Titans member Raven. So if we get some kind of a moment where people start yelling, Trigon shall rise, especially if it's Damien Dark, that would be beyond awesome. Something sort of like what they did with perhaps Slade on the old Teen Titans cartoon from years ago. Still pretty surprising in retrospect, just how dark that show went. But yeah, Trigon is a scary, scary critter. So, and Damien Dark being a Titans villain, it really wouldn't surprise me if they're drawing more than a few characters out of that particular well. Now, again, that's speculation. I know a few other people have floated the idea that it might be Etrigan the Demon, another major supernatural character in the DC universe. But this sort of thing is like cutting deals like with Damien Dark. That's not really Etrigan's thing. Plus, Etrigan, if you have Etrigan, you have to have Jason Blood. And we've already had a character whose last name was Blood, Sebastian Blood, Brother Blood, who is in the comics really firmly tied to Trigon. So I don't think they're going to want to bring in somebody like Jason Blood just because it would be really confusing to people. I think in terms of sort of advisor on anything supernatural, we're just going to stick with having Matt Ryan as John Constantine. And oh, yeah. Can't forget the Flash Forward. A cool little guest appearance by Barry Allen. And it would seem that a member of Team Arrow has fallen in battle. Now, my personal guess is that this is probably going to be Quentin. As great as Paul Blackthorne is, Quentin as a character kind of is starting to feel a little played out to me. So if he dies in the course of the battle with Damien Dark, then I can kind of see that. I mean, what a twist for Laurel. Her sister is back from the dead yet again, only for both of them to lose their father. I mean, knife in the gut, yo. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that there. So, as always, guys, thanks for joining me. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.